Wow. We just did our 30-second countdown with lots of live music. I hope you got some of that. Welcome everyone to Teams McQuaig webinar, which I'm going to introduce Vanessa, who we've been talking about this for nigh on 9 months, and we, Vanessa, getting together and showcasing your product, which I've used in my old business, Principal People, and it was a game changer for us, moving our contingent business through to retained, but also shoving those rates up to a decent, from 20 to 25% on easily with the product. So great to have McQuaig partnering team on this. This is a global business, of course, and albeit you're out in Toronto, I believe.
That's right.
Near there. So I'm going to introduce you now. I shall try and be quiet, but as a user of McQuaig in my previous recruitment days, I may chip in some stories that really helped us move Principal People up and strengthen our product range at the appropriate time. Jahisha, you have the floor. Thank you. Welcome.
I think Jahisha maybe isn't able to.
No, don't worry. Don't worry about Jahisha. Vanessa, she's taken our names off. So it was sitting under there. There we go. Vanessa, you have the floor. There
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, Simon. And thanks for having me here today. My name, as Simon said, is Vanessa. I've been with the McQuaig Institute for about 10 years now, and I oversee customer success and product and sales at McQuaig. McQuaig has been in the business of assessments and psychometrics for about 60 years now. Today, though, I'm not going to share a whole lot about McQuaig with you. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our methodologies, but what I really want to talk about, and whether you're using McQuaig or not, is some strategies that can help us move, like Simon said, from contingent to retained models. Before my time at McQuaig, I worked in the world of search, so I'm familiar with assessment of people, both as from your side of the game, as well as now sitting in a space where I peddle assessments to folks. So quick intro. I think it's obvious, why should we be looking at moving towards a retained model? And just as an introduction, I'm going to highlight to all of you what you probably already know. Contingent search, it can really keep you on a treadmill. You're always chasing and rarely are you leading. And I think that there's a lot broken with that. First up, it's really high effort, but you have really low control. You invest a lot of time up front with no guarantee of payoff. Next up, you're competing against the clock. Your clients are often working with multiple firms, and really speed can trump fit. There's limited influence that you've got. It can sometimes be hard to shape the search strategy or the process. And relationships can be transactional. It can be hard to build long-term client loyalty and trust, even when you have customers that you have built that with. If you're working contingent and they're working with other firms, those relationships can break quite easily sometimes. And then fall-offs. Fall-offs can be really frustrating. Poor onboarding, failed placements, all of that shifts blame to you. And it's hard to build that long-term client loyalty or trust. This goes back to the loss of control as well. So what about retained? the power of retained search is that you are going to be establishing partnerships. And I think that retained search is the future to, leveling up the success of your business. With retained search, you're going to get paid for your expertise, not just your placement. You'll have exclusivity. You're going to get commitment and exclusivity from your clients. And really importantly, you're going to have control over the process. That's going to help you to deliver better outcomes to the customer. This is a win-win on both sides. It's not a one-sided relationship. And you're going to embed yourself because you're going to be approaching your customers with increased consultation. You're really going to be further embedded into their strategic talent decisions. And ultimately, that's going to lead you to increased profitability, predictability, and profitability. Ultimately, retained work, it's not just more profitable, it's more sustainable, it's more strategic, and I think it's more rewarding as well when you're acting as a true partner to your customer. So, as we talk about, my goal today is to give you some tips to start thinking about transitioning to a more retained model. If you're already in that transition or you're already there, I think the tips and advice that I give still will be fairly relevant to you. And it may well help you level up your services that much more. And how are we going to get there? We just went through some introductions. I want to break this into 3 key parts that I think are really important when you're managing a retained search. First up, uncovering and understanding stakeholder vision, enhancing your interview precision, and importantly, your customers' interview precision. And then how do you go about securing long-term success? I'm a talker, but I am going to reserve some time for questions at the end. And once we get through some questions, I'll be watching the clock because I want to wrap up and leave you some information to learn more about McQuaig, should you wish to do so when we wrap up. And there is a chat. Feel free, if you have questions in the moment, pop them into the chat. If I'm able to, and I see the question, I'll pause and answer it in the moment. I might reserve them for the end. And I believe that Simon will be helping me out with question moderation. So if he sees something that I don't, that is setting off warning bells, we've got to talk about this right now, we can't wait, then he'll interrupt me as well.
Vanessa, as
Yes.
well, what I'd like to do, as you know, I sold Principal People back in 2020, and we'd started using McQuaig a couple of years before that. And we'd successfully moved a chunk of the business into retained. I'm really pleased today. We've been joined by Tom, the managing director of Principal People Now, who Tom worked with me for several years before I sold, and he and his team really took the business forward and significantly increased the retained level of business after I left. So nothing to do with me. Great work by Tom and his team. So we're lucky to have him here today just to support you with that. So thank you, Tom, for joining us. Great to see you. You're wonderfully backlit in the sunshine, right? In Farnborough, I believe.
Beautiful Farnborough.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll dip into you now and again. And if Vanessa, if other people don't ask you questions, I'm going to grill you on stuff as well. So thanks for joining us, Tom. Vanessa, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for joining, Tom. Because the both of you have experience using McQuaig, I will. In each of these sections, I might toss a question to you just to ask you about your personal experience, and I do really appreciate that. Thank you. So before I really get going, and I couldn't figure out poll functionality, so I don't have a poll. I've got a question, and you can type your answer into the comments. I'd like to know, as we start talking about aligning stakeholder vision, Can you tell me what the top reason your clients give you when they decline to interview a candidate that you've sourced? And if you don't mind, let me know with a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 in the chat, and I'll give a few seconds for everybody to log a comment, or for those of you who are able to log a comment. Hopefully you all are able to log comments. Jaysha, do you think I'm able to see everybody's comments? Because I only see yours right now. Oh, okay. I'm being told what you all are answering, I think. I'm seeing a few ones coming in. Misalignment with stakeholder expectations. I haven't seen any 2s come up just yet. Oh, first 2 came up, skills gap. Rarely is it 2 or 3, skills gap or overqualification. I have 1 comment. Number 4, inadequate experience. Several 5s, it just isn't the right fit. It looks like, and I'll do some counting afterwards if in an after share you're interested to hear others' experiences. What I'm seeing coming in is largely misalignment with stakeholder expectation, and it just isn't the right fit. That's something that we're going to talk about quite a bit today. In my experience, there's certain elements of fit that are difficult for people to articulate. It's not that they don't want to tell us, it's that they don't know the right words for it. Please do keep on dropping in those answers, because I think that they're relevant. The more I think about it, I think we will do an after share with the poll results and maybe some tips on how to overcome each of the challenges. But I'm seeing number 1 and 5 coming out pretty strongly. Nobody's given me a number 6 other yet. So I'm glad that you're experiencing that 1 and 5 are challenges, because that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Robert Half did some analysis, and they told us that stakeholder misalignment can account for 80% of search resets. And as you all know really well, a reset can add 4 to 8 weeks to the hiring process. It can be costly. It can be frustrating. It can have some impact on trust and perhaps erosion of trust. So I'm going to suggest that one of the most important things that you can do is create stakeholder alignment really early on in the process and get on the same page before the search starts. First, though, what are the qualities that you need consensus on? Where should you be focusing in your intake meetings? At McQuaig, back when we were founded, before our first assessment was created and hit the market, the founder of McQuaig, he was a world-renowned IO psychologist, and he was working with companies that were doing high-volume recruitment, and he was really interested in measuring not just qualities that he thought would pertain to success on the job, but also, how do I actually measure to see if that was true? Was I measuring the right things in the interview process, and were they in fact predictive on the job? And what he came up with through that work was sort of a model of thinking that says we praise people on 3 levels of depth. Eventually, that led him to create McQuaig's first assessment product. But the thought model says that we've got these 3 levels in which we assess people. The first level is just based on appearance. There was a study done at Princeton University, and it told us that within just 100 milliseconds, that's a really short time, people will start making decisions about you based on your face. They'll start making decisions about things like your attractiveness. That makes sense. You can tell that pretty quick. But then we start making these presumptive decisions on likability, competence. You can't tell that just by looking at somebody. And this all relates to bias, and we're human. We all have bias. Your clients have bias as well. It's really important for us to remember and ensure that we support our clients in understanding this as well. That level one, it can be important to assess. These are the elements that you can actually draw out from level one appraisal. It can be important. If I'm hiring a salesperson, they need to have a certain mannerism and expressiveness to them, but it has a really low impact on predicting their future performance. We get a little bit deeper when we appraise people at level two. Here we're looking at somebody's skills, their knowledge, their training. Most of this can be found on a resume. Most of this you probably already know about a person before you're speaking with them, and certainly your client knows before they're speaking with them, because you're going to talk about this when you present your candidate. You of course need to confirm some of this in the interview, but ultimately this is probably what you see on the piece of paper for your candidate. Better at predicting whether or not somebody will be successful. But in fact, the most predictive of whether or not somebody will be successful on the job is in this level three appraisal, where we start looking at things like their attitude, their motivation, persistence, determination, their aptitude and intelligence, character, and their temperament. McQuaig's assessments measure temperament and intelligence. So a couple of the elements there. These are the qualities that, circling back, I said, sometimes your customers don't know how to articulate it. These are usually the fit qualities. While sometimes the level 1 and 2 can be really important for hiring, we got to tick off the boxes. These are the qualities that are going to be the reasons why somebody is promoted 2 years down the line, or somebody's terminated 6 months down the line. So it's really important for us to get to these qualities in the intake meeting and get a really good understanding of what the customer is looking for, and to get them on the same page, because they might not be on the same page about those qualities either, because they're difficult to articulate and maybe they haven't discussed them internally. So why does this matter so much, getting on the same page? You're going to upfront establish a unified consensus. All of your stakeholders will know what we are looking for together. By going through this process, you're going to build trust, because you're going to be asking your customers questions that some of your competitors probably aren't asking them. And just by the nature of going through this process with them, you're going to be seen as more of a trusted advisor, and you're going to eliminate your search resets. 80% of search resets have to do with stakeholder misalignment. If we're sure that we've got a strong process to get that up front, we're going to eliminate those resets. So how do you go about doing that? How do you gather expectations, especially when you have multiple stakeholders? Sometimes you may only have one. Most times you probably have more than one. I'm going to suggest that in your intake meetings, think back to those 3 levels of appraisal. I've got a worksheet that we use with some of our clients to help define roles. We can share that out with you if anybody's interested. I'm going to suggest, though, that in intake meetings, I'm sorry, my text is a bit misaligned on that slide. You're going to ask the level 1 and 2 questions. I need to know the requirements in terms of, that level 1. What is their, appearance and presence need to be like? I'm going to find out about level 2. That is important. Like, what's the absolutely required experience? Most of that stuff they will have already written and documented, probably in the job description. I think your intake meetings need to really focus on what matters most, which is level 3. And you need to design a strong intake process that where you spend the bulk of your time right here. You want to get beyond the job description. The sorts of questions that will get you there. And many of you are probably asking some of these questions already. What are 3 goals for the successful candidate in year 1? How will performance be measured? Describe the relationships that the successful candidate will be engaged in and the challenges that each of those relationships might present. Fit within the team is super important. Describe the working environment. What are the pressures, the pace? How much autonomy will the person have? Describe potentially attractive and negative aspects of the job, because the more we can share with our candidates, the better we can make a strong placement. To create that unified vision and ensure that the stakeholders are on the same page, I think it's useful to build out an ideal candidate profile after that intake meeting. So how do we get there? So I say there's 5 steps. Number 1, structure those intake meetings around the 3 levels of appraisal. You should include all the individuals who hold an interest in the success of the role in question. You'll find that you're a lot more successful doing that when you have a retained agreement in place. But if you have a contingent agreement and you simply state, this is part of my process, it's really important for me to get the right fit, you may be able to achieve this. And the reason that this is really important, I know I've experienced it, and I suspect you all have as well. My main stakeholder loves the candidate I presented. Oh, but the manager didn't like them, and I don't get great feedback on what are all the whys. They should be included up front. They're the people that you need to get aligned. It's really important, step 3, to make space for every stakeholder to provide input. What you will find sometimes is the more assertive personalities in the room are the ones who get their voice heard because they're the loudest. We need to make space for everybody, and that's your job as a facilitator. And you'll facilitate this discussion amongst the stakeholders. And your goal is to find alignment, but also uncover the misalignment so you can get beyond it. And then finally, once you've come to that profile of what we are looking for, I think it's important to share it back to your client just to confirm the consensus. Some of my customers will do this along with calibration candidate job profile. So our intake meeting was really great. Here are the key qualities I'm going to be looking for. Here's a calibration resume of somebody that I think fits the box. What do you think of this? At McQuaig, we help with this process. We said that in level 3, elements that fit in here, somebody just asked for a copy of the presentation, and yes, absolutely, we'll send that through. We identified important qualities in level 3: personality and intelligence and aptitude. So we use a personality assessment called the word survey to assess candidates, but we have an assessment that we use to define roles as well. It's called the job survey. And what you're looking at here is the way I go about creating stakeholder alignment. We measure personality on 4 trait scales. Not going to get into it in depth, but that's what each one of those colored bars represents, one of the trait scales. Those pins you see, there's a set of pins for each person's responses. So there would be a pin on each of the 4, and they represent one person's responses. This allows me to look for outliers those outliers are misaligned with what everybody else is looking for. And it can be, these are the types of qualities that can be hard to articulate, and to come back to them in your calibration meeting after the intake and say, hey, I think I know what we're looking for, but from a personality perspective, we have a bit of misalignment. Let's talk that through. You know, Simon, you said we were looking for somebody slightly different. Why do you think that? And what do we really need? And you might adjust this benchmark so that everybody is in agreement. Simon, did you use benchmarking frequently in your practice?
The example I was going to give, and I'll go through I'll talk about the front end of that, just pitching for it to start with. But when we got to, when we won this role, it was I think it was the last thing I got involved with before I left the business and bought Team. But there were two key stakeholders. There was a CEO of a pretty big business in the construction space, and the HRD, and the CEO had a really strong vision about what he wanted for the person, and the HRD was somewhere else. And this allowed us to bring it together and get the right spec for the individual, because if we'd have had a mismatch, you know, if had we started, what are we looking for was the question. So we were able to go back very early in the process and say, you need to have a discussion about this and find out who was right, who was wrong, and where there's some compliance in this. So yeah, that was brilliant for that. And Tom, anything you want to add to that, because you've used this probably 100 times and I've used it just a couple.
Yeah, the alignment piece is really important, because a lot of companies don't tend to do that step. They tend to write the roles, signed off, out we go to market, and I'd say it's more often than not that people are not aligned with what they're looking for. And it can have one or two things. Either they get around the table and it might push your recruit back a week, but they agree of what the sort of person is before they start recruiting. Sometimes even change the job spec in terms of what they're even looking for, because there's a lot of assumptions that go on. But then it can also have another effect, which can be quite useful as well, where you might have about 3 or 4 cooks in the kitchen, and then the CEO or someone might look at their results from McQuaig not too long ago and say, right, I'm running this recruit now, ignore those people. this is my recruit, it's more important to me. I asked them their input, but it's just going to cause more issues in as well. So it can actually speed up your recruit and give you a quicker way to market. I think it is good. But another thing is as well, that chance of all 4 people coming back with exactly the same profile is, very, very, very unlikely. So it does open up that conversation. The other thing as well is that the way you can sell it very well is to say, right, I'm going to have a candidate who Gary will love, but you're going to hate. So if he's doing the first interview, they'll get brought forward and you'll hate them. Or he'll discount people in the first interview because you would love them, but you're not seeing them. So it's also working out their process of interviewing as well and saying, right, we can't have 2 mismatch at first stage and second stage, because then you're going to miss out on ones you would love to have seen, and you're not going to see the ones you want to, because you've got 2 different profiles interviewing at different stages. So it gets them thinking a lot more, but also shows them the depth of your understanding of the market. Whatever you recruit in, it's irrelevant what the sector is. It shows you the depth of your process and the understanding of how a recruitment process works. It goes outside of your specialism and really talks about, right, from my experience of X amount of years, this happens in recruitment. This is what alleviates those issues that essentially lengthen out hire significantly. And I think in showing that, you could sell retained so much better, especially if you say, like, we offer this with retained searches, we don't offer it with contingent searches. Yeah, then they understand why.
It really levels it up. Like when you're incorporating tools like this in a contingent search, it's difficult because it does take a bit of time, right? It does take a bit of consultation. And when you're purely racing the clock because you've got your competitors with a hat in the ring as well, you might elect not to do this. But the better you do this up front, the more likely you will be to get your placement. So, I mean, I would suggest that there's potential to take on this process, even with contingent searches, as you start to transition, because the clients will see, oh, Tom actually has a different way of going about things, and it's resulting in him getting me better candidates. And gosh, it was really great that he also led us through that conversation, highlighting where we're misaligned.
I think what I'd say on that is it's a very good product to back up the fact that you've got a deposit-led recruitment solution. You are paying upfront for a part of the fee, but these are the tools you get which you don't get in contingent, because at the end of the day, you're removing the risk, but you're also ensuring this client is involved in this recruit. I think the way it can work well in contingent recruitment is repeat business. In a case of this, we've worked with them before, they love us. Look, I tell you what, we can offer you this as well this time. So it cements relationships. Also, in a case that, say you've had a candidate that's lasted, I don't know, 6 months to 9 months, they're outside of rebate, haven't worked out for some reason or another, a contingent method, they're a bit annoyed because then they've got to pay you your fee of X amount again. It's something I've used before and say, look, I'm aware of this. Look, we want to get the right person. Tell you what, this time around, what we'll do is we'll involve something called McQuaig. I'll run you through it, but it's all about ensuring that culture fit. Now, you probably wouldn't have wanted to used it when you first started working with me because you didn't really know me from Adam. But now we've got a good relationship. Let me talk to you about this. It definitely can be used. I would just say that if you've just won the business and you don't have that solid relationship yet, it might be too long for you to miss out on candidates if you haven't got very good exclusivity terms and signed along to it.
That's a really good point. Like you need to be thoughtful of when to apply this full process, and up front, if it's a new client you just landed, you can make that call, right? I can get at this really quick, and here's what I'll need to do that. If you want me to, offer you a little bit more, here's what's part of my service offering, but it's going to cost something different probably because it does take a little bit more time.
If this is relevant, I was going to wait till later, but tell you the example we had on a pitch with the particular client, but I'll let you go. I'll let you jump forward a bit, I think, Vanessa, and then just wrap it up later.
I have a feeling that your comment is going to involve the candidate, which might be more fitting in the next section. So let me get into the next section. Okay. Or was it purely on the role?
No, it was before it. I'll tell the story quickly so you don't it doesn't hold you up. In 2017, we were approached by a construction company to hire a group head, a director of health and safety, and we said we do this on retained. I think we kicked off at 25%. We didn't have McQuaig, I might say, and they beat us up. They just said, well, we've got someone who will do this at 17%, 17.5%. I think we went down to 20. We dropped our trousers to there. We didn't get the job because they placed someone at 17%. 2.5 years later, they have a new new FD approaches me. He was at one of our other clients before. He said, I've heard what you do. We've got this job, head of health and safety, and it sort of rang a bell in my head, although I wasn't involved in the first piece. And I said, oh, I remember who you placed. You placed so-and-so. And they said, yeah. He said, it's not really working out. And we said, okay, why is that then? And they said, well, we wanted a strategic lead, and he's been brilliant operationally, but he hasn't got a strategic bone in his body. And we said, we know. We placed him in a previous role where he was brilliant operationally, but the spec you had wouldn't have fitted that. So I said, we've got this product now that will help, etc., but it's 25%. They said, oh, we never pay that. He said, anyway, the FD put me through to the HRD because he liked what I was talking about with McQuaig. And then I spoke to the HRD and she loved it. She said, but we never pay more than 17%. I said, give us 3 minutes with the CEO who's setting these rules for you.
Yeah.
And we can talk about what we did. And I think it was Tom's number 2 colleague that joined me on the call, George Wilson, who was brilliant. And we said, look, you hired someone 2.5 years ago because you wouldn't pay more than 17% for your group head of health and safety. That's very expensive rate for that particular role. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, you've been paying him 120 grand for 2.5 years and he's not fulfilled your requirements. I said, we've got this product now and we did a quick demo, literally a minute of a couple of slides. And he went, deal done. Find me my perfect man. Because we said strategically, you want someone strategic, and the McQuaig system and us would have pointed that out. The guy you placed, we knew already wouldn't fit that strategic role, but McQuaig would have highlighted it rather than just our feelings. It would have proven the fact.
Yeah.
And further down the line, when we used McQuaig, the HRD and the CEO were misaligned.
Yeah.
And exactly as Tom said, if the HRD had done that first interview without this alignment, the successful candidate that George placed finally just wouldn't have got to see the CEO who loved him. So great example. So it was a proper win-win. Anyway, I'll shut up now.
I'm glad you shared that story. Like, that's exactly why getting on the same page and defining all this upfront is so important. And it's funny. I told you at the start of the call, I come from the world of search, and I did use assessment, not for every search though. And when I look at my client base today, we do have quite a few folks in this space as customers, but they tend to be, when they find us, or we find them, it's not an easy audience for us to sell into, because immediately people start looking at, and Tom, you kind of brought it up, there are some barriers, like this might take a little bit longer. What if they don't do well on the assessment? And when I look at my customers who are really doing this well, it is so embedded into their process. I've got one executive search firm, and they shared with me that they charge an administrative fee on all of their searches. And really what that fee is these days is this McQuaig part of the process. There's not a whole lot else in that category. They've like tripled that fee since adding McQuaig in. Like they're able to really quickly demonstrate value and get revenue connected to that value prop from the customers. And that comes from them presenting it forward as the solution, right? Just like you did with the CEO to say, this is how I'm going to find that stronger fit. It's not a hard sell for the customer. And if you own the process, it's going to work to your benefit, not to your detriment. And this interview precision piece, this is a piece that does make some search consultants nervous, because what if the results aren't good? And I'm going to speak to that a little bit. We talked about the level 1 assessment. A lot of bias sits there. While HireVue tells us that over 40% or more of hiring decisions are influenced by unconscious bias. We're human, we're biased. The best that we can do is come up with strategies to mitigate bias. We can't eliminate it. Humans are biased. And I feel like the audience here, you all know that, I think. I think all of you are excellent interviewers, but is your client? They might not be. So this part of the process is about managing your client somewhat and enhancing their abilities and the results. And why are you doing this? You're doing it for 3 key reasons. Number one, enhancing process precision. If you know that you're assessing candidates all through the same lens and your customer is as well, there's going to be more precision in the recruit. It's going to save time because we're all looking for the same things, and we're mitigating the fact that we don't have to have conversations disagreeing on this quality or that quality. And ultimately, we're going to help our customers reduce bias in the interview process and make decisions based on actual things that matter. We're going to do this by interviewing for what matters most. And like I said, evaluating all candidates through the same lens. I'm going to skip the poll here. And I'm going to tell you that when I poll people, and it's because we're running a little bit over on time, I'm going to tell you that when I ask people this question, what are your favorite interview questions? These are the sorts of things that I hear back. What are your strengths and weaknesses? Where do you want to be in 5 years? How do you work under pressure? Are you a team player? And then you get some companies that ask these kind of wacky questions. And I understand the reason they want to see a thought process. How many ants would fit in a golf ball? I think these are terrible interview questions, and I don't think they should be asked. And I don't think you can tell your client that, because if this is one of their favorite interview questions, you don't want to step on toes by telling them, don't ask it. I think what you can do, though, is give them some other ways to assess folks that will be more accurate than these questions. The answers to these questions can be interesting, but they're not predictive of whether or not somebody's going to be successful on the job. Every single one of these questions relates to level 1 and 2 qualities. That's what most people see in the interview, and that's the tip of the iceberg. It's why a lot of hiring decisions are made. And unfortunately, it's the level 3 qualities that are below the surface that's going to be what you actually get on the job. And these are the reasons that somebody is either promoted or terminated. So we want to get our clients to start exploring the level 3. It's very important. How are you going to do that? Behavior-based interviewing. I'm sure all of you use behavior-based interviewing. You're going to ask for specific examples of how a candidate has demonstrated some job-related behavior in the past. These questions usually start with, tell me about a time. How did you handle it when? Have you ever had to? If you're asking these questions, awesome. Your client might not be. So you want to get them to asking some of these questions, because the absolute best predictor that we have of what you're going to do tomorrow is what you did yesterday. Your past behavior predicts your future behavior. So I think you need to set your clients up for success and guide them through the interview process. When you're presenting a candidate to your customer, in that candidate presentation, I think there should be some reiteration of those level 1, 2, and 3 qualities that you're looking for. So here's what we're looking for, and then present your candidate and highlight alignment and gaps. There will be gaps. If my level 1, 2, and 3, if I've got 10 qualities I'm looking for, it's unlikely you're going to find a candidate with all 10 things. Make sure you communicate it to your client. The reason I'm presenting this person is because they align super well in these areas. There were a few gaps. Here they are. I've already explored them and I'm comfortable with them. And that's why I'm presenting the candidate to you. I want you to make sure you explore those gaps as well. And here's a few questions you can use to try to do that. So you're not taking over their interview process and eliminating those favorite questions, but by doing this, you might be inserting a few additionally predictive questions into the process. And of course, this is a step that McQuaig can help with. if you're not using McQuaig, I think that that's a process that really can work, and you should still, consider implementing that. If you are using McQuaig, the way that that presentation might look, and what you're looking at here is on the left, I have a job profile, and on the right, candidates have two graphs. I won't get into why, but on the right is my candidate, and they're not in perfect alignment, but they might well be a really excellent fit. And with the McQuaig results, it allows me to go to the client and say, this person's a potential match. Keep an eye out for these gaps. Make sure you explore them. And I'm going to give you an interview guide that has great interview questions to help you explore those gaps. They're mostly behavioral-based questions. And the beauty about a behavioral-based question, for those of you who aren't using them as frequently, is they're very difficult to answer correctly. I'm going to tell you about an experience, and as a candidate, I'm going to try to present my best self and tell you about one that I perceive to be successful. But what you're looking for is the actual behaviors, and successful or not, it might be misaligned with the behaviors you're looking for. And so this is what I would encourage you to use these interview guides, but also it should get passed on to your customer to level up their interviews with the candidate. Tom, did you used to use the interview guide frequently with your customers?
Yeah. So once the reports come back, the interview guide's really good because it goes through each of these sections. I think is the interview guide the one that's a bit shorter, and the report the one that's about.
Yeah, we have a lot of reporting options. Sometimes it can be overwhelming for a client to give them everything, but all of our reports are somewhat customizable, so you can carve it down.
One was a bit shorter. So yeah, we did the job fit for interview guide was the one we use, and then it was. I suppose the other good thing about it as well is that all of these things are normally, if they're not face to face, they're booked over Teams. So it's constant. It's having that constant. Constant control almost of the recruit, and you've got weekly catch-ups doing this sort of stuff. You get the buy-in more and more each time with the recruit, so it helps kind of influence the recruit a lot more, especially when you're going through the interview guide. Because the other thing as well is when they see potential match or does not match, it gives you something to really talk about, and also to talk about human nature. Yeah, they're generally a domineering individual, but we generally find that some people are more dynamic and more emotionally aware than others. So in certain situations, they might not be, but you need to explore that in your interview, and they kind of see that more about the personal fit to their company than just matching a CV to a job spec. It does help.
Yeah, and there's opportunity in there too. Like, it's very rare that you're going to have somebody that checks off all of your requirements, right? But it allows us to at least go into the relationship with our eyes totally open. Like, we know what to expect. And I've actually personally hired people that were, forget about being like a potential match. I've hired people that came back as a does not match. Like, they don't align with the benchmark at all. But what I did before I hired them, there were 10 other really compelling reasons that person would be fantastic. And so I went back and thought, okay, do I need to change my expectations and maybe refine the role? And that's what I've done in the past. Like, I've massaged the role a little bit. And for that reason, those people were successful. Had I taken that person who I thought was great for, 10 reasons, but they didn't fit behaviorally, and tried to fit that, square peg into a round hole, it wouldn't have worked out. But because I changed my expectations, changed the role somewhat, it did work out. And your clients have that opportunity as well. So now that we've made the placement successfully, awesome, job's done. You can walk away, take your payment. Wonderful. I'm going to say no. I think that there are some ways that you can really impact whether or not a placement sticks. And also show really increased value that'll help you increase your fees. Brandon Hall Group says that a great onboarding process can improve new hire retention by 82% and productivity by 70%. People, when they start a new job, those first 3 months are critical. We're often deciding whether or not we're going to stay in that job in those first 3 months. We might stay there for a year because we want to get our learning under our belt and, want our resume to look a certain way. But we make those decisions early. So what can you do to impact the success of your candidate post-placement? It's going to boost your service offering. I'm going to tell you why I think you really need to do it. First and foremost, your competitors aren't doing it. It's going to help you to differentiate your brand. Very few of your competitors are doing it. Next up, my suggestions to how you can do this are going to help you take meaningful pulse checks. Rather than calling your new placement and your client, how are things going? How are you liking it? I mean, those are tend to be shallow conversations. I'm going to give you an opportunity to have some meaningful pulse check conversations that add value for both sides. Because onboarding and those first 90 days are so important, I think that you're going to really reduce, if not eliminate, your fall offs if you take on some of these strategies. And ultimately, the reason that you're doing all of this, you're going to get more retained searches and you're going to be able to charge more money. So I want to suggest 3 high impact, low effort strategies that you can start now. And, if you want to explore how McQuaig can fit into these strategies, we're happy to have those conversations as well, because you can definitely take these on without using an assessment tool, but we can level you up a little bit with our tools. So first up, support onboarding with BossFit. Have both of the leader and new employee share their working styles, facilitate a conversation. How do I like to communicate? How do I like to learn new information? What's my preferred pace of work? And then based on that facilitated conversation, consider, how are we going to work well together? Where are we going to encounter obstacles? How can we lean into synergies and mitigate those obstacles? We use our personality reports at this stage, and it can be, for the new employees specifically, this is, if I'm hiring somebody, I get to learn a lot about them in the interview process. If they're reporting into me, they don't usually get to learn that much about me. Even adding this level of transparency can be very helpful for a new employee. They often don't learn some of these things until experiencing it. And that might mean working with that new leader for 6 months, 8 months. If it's a bad onboarding, the damage may have been done by now. So if you can facilitate some kind of onboarding exercise, I think that would be really great. Next up, support their ongoing success by looking at their job fit. This would be an activity that maybe you would do one-on-one with your new placement, although you would have positioned it with your client up front that this is part of your service offering. You'd actually share with them, you know what, before we started this search, I did define what some of the really key qualities were that we were looking for, and I want to share them with you. You'll share with them their 1, 2, and 3 level qualities that you were looking for, and then you'll share with them, you aligned really well. We picked you because you're going to be awesome, but there were a couple gaps I want you to be aware of. And then work with them you don't have to coach them. You're not a coach, but you can help them develop some kind of development plan for success that they can self-implement to make sure that when those misalignments come up, they don't hold them back. McQuaig fits into there, of course, because we have that benchmark and we can see how the candidate aligned to it. And we do have a self-development report that you can actually hand them, making it really low effort on your part, but potentially something really valuable and impactful for your new placement. And then finally, you can support collaboration with Company Fit. You can consider using some kind of assessment product like McQuaig for team integration to help new placements better understanding existing dynamics on the team. If you're placing a leader, it can be very useful for them to understand the different personalities and behavioral profiles within their own teammates. And within the whole team members can develop some strategies to boost a collaborative impact. So we've got a product that brings together many profiles. It's called Team Sync, and this sort of work would happen in here. I think that of the three things I suggested, this one might be slightly highest effort. If you're using McQuaig, we lower that effort because it's all done within our app. It's also, though, probably the one thing that you might be able to charge a little bit more for. Like, this would be a pretty big enhancement because now we're assessing a number of people, and it might even open the door for you for some light consulting work with these customers to boost team performance. We're getting real close to the Q&A here, so I just want to ask really quickly, Tom or Simon, did either of you employ any of these post-placement strategies?
Over to you, Tom. You did all the work. I did.
To a degree, I think for want of a better word, the hoops you make your candidates jump through to do this, it creates a much closer relationship with them anyway. So you've always got a much warmer call in touch with those candidates. Yeah, I mean, it's a funny one because even at a very high level, most clients, once it is done, they'll keep in touch with you now and again. It's more the candidate that will. It's something we could look into more, I think, in terms of our the senior roles. But I suppose what I would say actually is something we didn't cover here is we use McQuaig when we actually employ for ourselves. So for internal recruitment, it's a really good tool as well across all the roles we have. But honest answer is no. On the longer term onboarding, it's not something we really have delved into.
If you want to connect with me afterwards, Tom, I think that if you're already using McQuaig as you are, it would be super low effort to implement the boss fit and job fit pieces because it's essentially just providing them with a couple reports and giving them a guideline of the activity. And we can have like a 10-minute conversation. I can get you there. For anyone else, I mean, you haven't even explored McQuaig fully yet. You might want to explore McQuaig first before we get to that conversation. So I'd like to open it up for Q&A at this point. If you can drop any questions that you have in the chat, and I'll monitor it as I'll continue a little bit of wrap up here because, I've given you a number of suggestions that, of course, you can act on, whether you're using McQuaig or a similar tool. But if you would like to learn more about McQuaig, I got to give you my brief pitch. I've in each section, I told you a bit about how McQuaig can drive return on investment and help you to, boost your service offering. And we do that really through helping you to align stakeholder vision, by helping you enhance placement precision, and then supporting long-term success with some value add services. We're relevant throughout the talent life cycle. While you will likely be most interested in those earlier stages, up to onboarding, we have had some customers in the search space in the past really love what they saw out of McQuaig and end up hiring a coach or consultant to add to their service offering overall. So relevant to know that we're applicable in all aspects of the talent life cycle. If you do want to learn more, you will be getting an after share, and I see Jaysha did share in the comments as well. But you can scan this QR code to get to us, or you can email me direct. I know many of you, if not most of you, are in the UK. McQuaig has an exclusive distributor out there. So if you contact us, you might be dealing with somebody a little bit more local to you. If you're outside of the UK, you'll probably be dealing with somebody direct at McQuaig, and for most of us are in Canada, close to the Toronto area.
One of the things that I think I've learned from this is that if you build your process around McQuaig, you can offer and you can migrate your business to a wide executive search program. I know a couple of our members who have done really well I'll give you an example, in finance and accounting. They placed an FD in a role, but because the process was so good, the company said, will you find me a COO? And years down the line, because it was a public company, they said, we love the process you work with. We're looking for a new CEO now. And one of our members has placed 5 execs in a FTSE 100 company, just by having the right process. Now, they didn't have the specific knowledge necessarily around the different skill sets, but with the brief with McQuaig and the brief from the client and the tool itself, it made it, it makes it easy to really pitch senior exec search and not have to sit in a narrow field of speciality. You can pitch for bigger stuff, wider margins, and support boardrooms, with some fulfillment. Really exciting. Well, thank you, Vanessa. I think we've answered a lot of the questions, and I think Tom, to his credit, gave some life to the practicalities and the value of using the product and the service through the recruitment process. So thank you, Tom, for that. And Jahisha will send every attendee a copy of the session with some other contact details as well. So she'll sort that out. She's brilliant at that. Well, I just wrap up by saying thank you very much, Vanessa. Great to have you on board. I know it's 9 o'clock now in Montreal, isn't it? You got up early for this, or not that early, but thank you for preparing.
I was happy to be here. Thank you for having me, and I hope you all found this to be useful.
That's brilliant. And thank you, Tom. Great to see you again, and great feedback as well.
Cheers.
All the
Thank
best.
you.
Cheers for now. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.